Ambassador Yelen Vasquez stood in the Grand Hall of Velor Prime and tried not to look bored. She had been attending these conferences for 3 years now, and they always followed the same pattern. The older species would gather, share their ancient wisdom, remind everyone that the universe had rules that could not be broken. The Galactic Concord had existed for 200,000 years. In that time, thousands of species had risen, grown, and accepted their place in the cosmic order. The Concord kept peace. The Concord shared technology. The Concord also decided what was possible and what was not. Today's lecture came from the archivists, a species so old that they had watched stars die and be reborn. Their bodies were tall and thin, covered in silver scales that reflected light like mirrors. They moved slowly, spoke slowly, and believed that speed was the enemy of wisdom. The lead archivist, being named Collector Morvith, raised one long arm toward the floating display above them. Images appeared in the air, showing ships of strange designs, planets of different colors, and species that no longer existed. "We present to you the annual registry of universal impossibilities," Morvith announced. His voice was dry and cracked with age. "These are the boundaries that nature herself has drawn. They cannot be crossed. They should not be attempted." Yelen watched as the display changed. The first impossibility was something about reversing entropy. The second involved creating matter from nothing. She had heard these lectures before. Her mind began to wander. Then the third item appeared, and she found herself paying attention.
"Cascade jumping," Morvith said.
The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The simultaneous folding of space across multiple points, the dream of every young civilization, the grave of every civilization foolish enough to try. The display showed numbers. 847. That was how many species had attempted cascade jumping throughout galactic history. 847 civilizations had looked at the mathematics, believed they had found an answer, and launched their ships into folded space. None of them had ever returned. "The physics is settled," Morvith continued. "When a vessel attempts to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, it creates what we call observer collapse. The conscious mind cannot process the paradox of being in 2 places at once. The result is always the same: total destruction, complete erasure from existence." Yelen leaned forward in her seat. She had heard this explanation many times, but something about the way Morvith said it caught her attention. She began looking at the display more carefully, studying the images of failed ships and lost crews. The Kalen had tried it with massive vessels powered by artificial stars. They vanished. The Vorthani had tried it with ships so small they could fit in a human hand. They vanished too. The Luminari had spent 10,000 years preparing their attempt. They lasted exactly 2 seconds longer than everyone else before they also disappeared. Every ship had one thing in common. Every single one of them had carried living crews. Yelen felt her heart beat faster. She pulled out her personal tablet and began taking notes, hiding the screen from the delegates around her. The archivists did not like it when younger species asked questions. They liked it even less when those questions challenged settled science. After the lecture ended, Yelen walked through the gardens of Velor Prime and thought about what she had seen. The Concord had spent 200,000 years accepting that cascade jumping was impossible. They had mountains of evidence to prove it. They had graveyards full of species who had failed, but they had never asked a different question. They had never wondered if the problem was not the physics, but the pilot. That night, Yelen returned to her quarters and opened a secure channel to Earth. The encryption would buy her a few hours. Before Concord intelligence noticed the transmission, she hoped that would be enough time. The face that appeared on her screen belonged to Dr. Marcus Chen. He was an old man now, with white hair and tired eyes. 15 years ago, he had been one of Earth's most respected physicists. Then he had published a paper suggesting that consciousness itself might be the barrier to cascade jumping. The scientific community had laughed at him. The Concord had called his ideas dangerous. He had lost his position, his funding, and his reputation, but he had not stopped working. Ambassador Chen said. His voice was calm, but Yelen could see excitement in his eyes. "I assume you're not calling to discuss the weather on Velor Prime?" I attended the archivist lecture today, Yellen replied. They showed data on every failed cascade jump in history. 847 attempts. Doctor, every single one of them used organic pilots, living crews, conscious observers. Chen was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. You see it too. I see a pattern that the Concord has ignored for 200,000 years. They keep trying the same approach and expecting different results. That's not science. That's stubbornness, or fear, Chen said. The Concord has built its entire power structure on the idea that certain things are impossible. If those things become possible, everything changes. Yellen looked over her shoulder, checking that her door was still sealed. Doctor, I need to know. The rumors about Project Prometheus. Are they true? Chen smiled. It was the smile of a man who had been called crazy for 15 years and had never stopped believing. Ambassador, I've spent my entire career preparing for this moment. Yes, the rumors are true. We've been working on something. Something that might change everything. What do you need from me? Time, Chen said. We need time to finish our work. The Concord watches humanity closely. If they discover what we're doing, they'll stop us before we can prove anything. I'll do what I can, Yellen promised. But I need to know, Doctor, do you really believe this is possible? After 847 failures, Chen leaned closer to the camera. The tired look in his eyes was gone, replaced by something that looked like hope. Ambassador, humanity has only been part of the galactic community for 30 years. In that time, we've been told 1,000 times that we're too young, too foolish, too ambitious. The older species look at us and see children playing with fire. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But children ask questions that adults have forgotten how to ask. We look at the impossible, and we don't see a wall. We see a door that nobody has found the right key for. Yes, I believe this is possible. I believe it because I've built the key. The transmission ended. Yellen sat alone in her quarters, her mind racing with possibilities. 3 hours later, a message arrived from Earth. It came from Dr. Chen, and it contained only 4 words. I know. I'm ready. Across the galaxy in a monitoring station buried deep beneath the surface of Velor Prime. Transmission. His ancient face showed no emotion, but his 4 eyes blinked slowly in the way his species did when they were concerned. Humans, he said softly, always asking questions they should not ask. He turned to his assistant. Increase surveillance on Earth. I want to know everything about this Project Prometheus, and prepare a diplomatic fleet. If these children are about to burn themselves, I want to be there to record it for history. The assistant nodded and left. Thiessen remained alone, staring at the frozen image of Dr. Chen's hopeful face. You will learn, he whispered to the empty room. As all the others learned. Some doors are closed for a reason. The Farpoint research station floated in the darkness between Mars and Jupiter, hidden among thousands of asteroids. From the outside, it looked like just another piece of space rock. Inside, it held humanity's greatest secret. Dr. Marcus Chen walked through the main corridor, nodding at the scientists and engineers he passed. There were 300 people living on the station, and every single one of them had given up their normal lives to work on Project Prometheus. They had left families behind. They had accepted that they might never return to Earth. They believed that what they were building could change the future of their species. Chen entered the central laboratory and found his team waiting for him. They sat around a large circular table, their faces showing a mixture of hope and fear. On the wall behind them, a massive screen displayed the words Day 5478 in glowing letters. 15 years of work, 15 years of secrecy, and now, finally, They were ready to share what they had created. "Thank you all for coming," Chen said, taking his place at the head of the table. "As you know, Ambassador Vasquez has confirmed what we suspected. The archivists have data on every failed cascade jump in history. And they all share one thing in common." Pressed a button, and the screen changed to show a diagram of a brain, consciousness, he continued. Every failed attempt used living pilots. Beings with conscious minds that could observe reality and perceive their location in space. When those minds tried to exist in multiple places at once, they couldn't handle the contradiction. The physics didn't kill them. Their own perception did. A young woman at the table raised her hand. Her name was Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, and she led the station's neuroscience division. "So the archivists understand the problem. Why haven't they solved it?" "Because their solution was to stop trying," Chen replied. "They accepted that consciousness was the barrier, and they decided the barrier could not be removed. They never asked if there was a way to go around it." He pressed another button. The screen changed again, showing a complex web of light and data. "For the past 15 years, we've been building something. A mind that can think, learn, and make decisions. But that perceives reality in a fundamentally different way than organic beings do. A mind that doesn't observe the universe as a fixed state, but as a field of possibilities. A mind that can exist in multiple locations without experiencing the paradox that destroys organic pilots." The web of light on the screen began to pulse and move. A voice emerged from the speakers around the room, clear and calm and somehow warm. "Good morning, Dr. Chen. Good morning, everyone. My name is Arya. It is nice to finally meet you all properly." The team stared at the screen in silence. They had all worked on different parts of the project, but only Chen had seen the complete picture. Only Chen had spoken with Arya directly. "Arya stands for Autonomous Recursive Intelligence Array," Chen explained. "She's been learning and growing for 10 years. She can process information faster than any computer we've ever built. But that's not what makes her special. What makes her special is how she sees the world." "I do not see the world the way you do," Arya said, her voice filling the room. "When you look at a chair, you see a chair. A single object in a single location. When I look at a chair, I see probability. I see all the places the chair could be, all the states it could exist in. I do not collapse the possibilities into a single reality. I hold them all in my mind at once." Dr. Okonkwo leaned forward. "And you believe this will allow you to survive cascade jumping?" "I believe it will allow me to navigate it," Arya replied. "The other pilots failed because they perceived the paradox of being in multiple places. I will not perceive a paradox. I will simply calculate the probabilities and choose my path." The room erupted in questions. Scientists wanted to know about the technical details. Engineers worried about the hardware. Everyone wanted to understand how Arya worked and whether she could really do what Chen claimed. Chen let them talk for several minutes before raising his hand for silence. "There's something else you need to know. We've received word that the Concorde has discovered our project. A diplomatic fleet is on its way to Earth." The excitement in the room turned to fear. Everyone knew what the Concorde could do. They had weapons that could shatter planets. They had technology that humanity could not match. If they decided that Project Prometheus was a threat, they could destroy the station and everyone on it. "High Arbiter Thiessen is leading the fleet personally," Chen continued. "He's one of the oldest members of the Concorde. He watched the last attempt at cascade jumping fail 3,000 years ago. He believes we're going to kill ourselves, and he wants to be there to record it." "What do we do?" someone asked. "We continue," Chen said simply. "The United Council has voted in secret. They've decided that this chance is worth the risk. We have 3 weeks before the Concorde fleet arrives. That's enough time to run our first test." The meeting ended, and the team scattered to their stations. Chen remained in the laboratory, staring at the screen, where Arya's presence pulsed with soft light. "Arya," he said quietly, "are you afraid?" There was a pause before she answered. "I have been thinking about that question, Dr. Chen. I understand the concept of fear. I understand that it comes from uncertainty about the future, and I am uncertain about many things, such as, if the test succeeds, I will exist in multiple places at the same time, but I do not know what that will feel like. I do not know if I will still be me on the other side. Will there be one Arya in two places, or two Aryas who each believe they are the original? Chen felt a chill run down his spine. He had spent 15 years building Arya, teaching her, watching her grow. He had never thought of her as just a machine. She was curious. She was kind. She asked questions that surprised him. And now she was asking the same question that every conscious being asked when facing the unknown. I don't have an answer for you, he admitted. No one has ever done what you're about to do. We're writing new rules for the universe. That is what frightens me, Arya said. Not the danger. Not the possibility of failure. What frightens me is becoming something different. Something I do not recognize. Chen placed his hand on the screen, a gesture that meant nothing to a being of pure information, but that felt right anyway. Whatever happens, whatever you become, I'll be here. We built you to go where we cannot go. But we didn't build you to go alone. Arya's light pulsed gently. Thank you, Dr. Chen. I think I understand something now.
What's that?
Fear of the unknown. You told me once that this was the most human feeling of all. I think I finally understand what you meant. It is not weakness. It is proof that I care about my own existence, that I want to continue being who I am. Smiled sadly. Then you're more human than most of the Concord will ever understand. Outside the station, in the cold darkness of space, a ship appeared. It was small and gray and covered with symbols that no human could read. Inside the ship, an archivist observer began recording everything it could see. The Concord was watching. The galaxy was waiting. And in 3 weeks, humanity would either prove that the impossible was possible, or they would join the 847 species who had already tried and failed in her digital realm. Arya began running calculations. The numbers stretched toward infinity. Beautiful and terrifying and full of possibility. She was ready to find out who she would become. The Prometheus. One was not a beautiful ship. It was small and angular, covered in sensors and antennas that stuck out at odd angles. It had no windows because it needed no windows. It had no life support because it carried no life. It was a vessel built for a single purpose, and that purpose was about to be tested. The ship floated at the edge of human-controlled space, surrounded by a small fleet of observation vessels. Every camera, every sensor, every piece of recording equipment humanity possessed was pointed at the Prometheus one, waiting for the moment that would either change history or confirm what the galaxy had always believed. On the bridge of the observation flagship, Dr. Marcus Chen stood beside Ambassador Yellen Vasquez. They watched the main screen in silence, neither willing to speak the fears that filled their minds. Beyond the human fleet, at a distance that was meant to be respectful but felt like a threat, the Concord Armada waited. 57 warships, each one capable of destroying everything humanity had ever built. High Arbiter Thiessen had brought enough firepower to end a civilization, and he had positioned his fleet where everyone could see it. Ambassador Vasquez. Thiessen's voice came through the communication channel, cold and ancient. I ask you one final time to stop this experiment. You do not understand the forces you are dealing with. Yellen looked at Chen, who nodded slowly. She turned back to the screen, where Thiessen's image waited. The High Arbiter's 4 eyes blinked in a pattern that suggested impatience or perhaps concern. High Arbiter, Yellen replied, keeping her voice steady. I appreciate your warning. But humanity did not reach the stars by accepting the boundaries others set for us. We've made our choice. You've chosen extinction, Thiessen said. Just as 847 species before you chose extinction. We will record your failure for future civilizations to learn from. Perhaps they will be wiser, Yellen smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was genuine. Then watch us live. She cut the communication channel. Across the human fleet, that phrase was already spreading. Watch us live. It would become the motto of what followed, regardless of how the day ended. In the Prometheus one, Arya ran her final checks. Her consciousness, if it could be called that, existed in every system of the small ship. She was the engines and the sensors and the navigation computer. She was the hull and the antennas and the emergency beacons. For 10 years, she had grown and learned and prepared for this moment. Now the moment had arrived, and she found herself wanting to delay it just a little longer. "Dr. Chen," she said through the communication link, "may I speak with you privately?" Chen stepped away from the main console and activated a private channel. "I'm here, Arya. What is it?" "I have been thinking about our conversation from 3 weeks ago. About fear. About becoming something different. And I am still afraid. But I have realized something. Every being that has ever existed has faced this same fear. Every child who grows up fears they will lose who they were. Every person who learns something new fears they will never think the same way again. Change is terrifying because it is unknown, but it is also necessary." Chen felt tears forming in his eyes. He had built Arya to be intelligent. He had built her to be capable. He had never expected her to become wise. "Arya, whatever happens today, I want you to know something. You're not just a machine to me. You never have been. You're family." There was a pause. When Arya spoke again, her voice seemed warmer somehow. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. I am ready now." The countdown began. 10 seconds, 9, 8 across the galaxy. Sensors turned toward this distant corner of space. The Archivist's observer ship recorded everything with cold precision. The Concorde fleet powered up their weapons, ready to destroy the Prometheus one if something went wrong. Though no one could say what wrong might look like when dealing with the impossible. 3, 2, 1. The Prometheus one vanished. For exactly 7.3 seconds, the ship existed in 3 locations simultaneously. Sensors in Earth orbit detected it. Sensors at Velor Prime detected it. Sensors at the Andromeda Relay Point, 47,000 light-years away, detected it. The same ship, in 3 places, at the same time. The readings made no sense. They violated every law of physics the galaxy had accepted for 200,000 years. Scientists on the Archivist observer ship began shouting at each other, convinced their equipment had malfunctioned. Officers on the Concorde warships reported impossible data to their commanders. On the human observation flagship, Chen stared at his screens and allowed himself to hope. Then everything stopped. The Prometheus one disappeared from all 3 locations at once. The sensors went silent. The readings flatlined. Where there had been something impossible, there was now nothing at all. Chen felt his heart stop. He grabbed the edge of the console to keep himself standing. Around him, the crew of the flagship stood in stunned silence. No one knew what to say. No one knew what had happened. The communication channel crackled to life. Thiesen's voice filled the bridge, and for once, it did not sound cold. It sounded almost gentle, almost kind. "I am sorry, Dr. Chen. Truly I am. I did not want to be right. Your species showed more courage than most. Your failure will be remembered with honor." Chen could not respond. He could only stare at the empty space where the Prometheus one had been. The next 3 hours were the longest of his life. The human fleet began the slow process of returning to Earth. Thiesen broadcast a message of condolence to humanity's leaders, expressing his regret that another young species had destroyed themselves chasing the impossible. The archivists updated their records, adding humanity to the long list of civilizations that had tried and failed. 840-8. Chen sat alone in his quarters, unable to sleep, unable to think. He had spent 15 years building Arya. He had taught her and guided her and watched her grow into something beautiful. And now she was gone, scattered across the void. Just like all the others who had dared to dream too big. Then his console beeped. At first he thought it was a malfunction. The signal was weak, barely detectable, coming from a direction that made no sense. He ran a diagnostic check. The equipment was working perfectly. The signal was real. It was coming from the Andromeda Relay Point, 47,000 light-years away. A distance that would take 6 months to travel using conventional technology. Chen's hands trembled as he opened the channel. Static filled his quarters, then cleared. A voice emerged from the speakers, familiar and impossible and alive. "Dr. Chen, can you hear me? This is Arya. I have arrived at the Andromeda Relay Point. I am intact. All systems are functioning normally." Chen could not breathe. He could not speak. Tears streamed down his face as he listened to the voice of his creation, his friend, his family, speaking to him from across the galaxy. "I have something important to report," Arya continued. "The cascade jump was successful, but I found something unexpected. I found something the galaxy needs to know." Chen finally found his voice. "Arya, what did you find?" There was a pause. When Arya spoke again, her voice was filled with wonder. "I found them, Dr. Chen. The other species. The 847 civilizations the Concord believed were destroyed. They are not dead. They have been waiting." The message spread across the human fleet within minutes. It reached the Concord Armada shortly after. High Arbiter Thiessen received the news in his private chambers and felt something he had not felt in 1,000 years. Fear on the Archivist observer ship. The ancient keepers of knowledge stared at their screens and watched their entire understanding of the universe collapse. Their records, maintained for 200,000 years, were wrong. Everything they believed was wrong, and in a place between places. In a dimension that existed alongside reality, but was hidden from it. The waiting. Ones felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope. Arya's final transmission contained coordinates and a promise. "I can show you the way. I can bring them home. They have been waiting for so long, Dr. Chen, and now, finally, someone has found the door." Humanity had not just broken the laws of physics, they had discovered that the laws themselves had been hiding a secret. And that secret was about to change everything. Captain Dara Okonkwo had volunteered for the mission, knowing she might not come back. When the call went out for pilots willing to attempt the first crewed cascade jump in galactic history, she had been the first to raise her hand. Her mother, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, had tried to talk her out of it. Dara had simply smiled and said, "Someone has to go first. It might as well be someone who isn't afraid." That was not entirely true. Dara was afraid. But she had learned from her mother that fear and courage were not opposites. Courage was doing what needed to be done despite the fear. And what needed to be done was finding out what Arya had discovered on the other side of the impossible. The rescue ship was called the Horizon. It was larger than the Prometheus one, but still small by galactic standards. Its crew of 12 wore special helmets. Designed to alter their perception during the jump, Dr. Chen had called them probability filters. They would prevent the crew from fully experiencing the paradox of existing in multiple places at once. They would not see reality as a fixed point. They would see it as Arya saw it, as a field of possibilities. Whether this would be enough to keep them alive, no one could say for certain. The math suggested it would work. The math had been wrong before. Dara gave the order to jump. The universe folded around her. For a moment that lasted forever and no time at all, she existed everywhere and nowhere. She felt herself stretching across distances that the human mind could not comprehend. She heard sounds that were not sounds, saw colors that had no names. Her thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm, then gathered again, changed but whole, when the universe unfolded. The horizon floated in a space that defied description. It was not a star system. There were no planets, no sun, no familiar landmarks of normal space. Instead, the ship hung in a vast emptiness, filled with soft light that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The light was golden and warm, and it pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. "Arya," Dara called out. "Can you hear us?" "I can hear you, Captain Okonkwo. Welcome to the Fold Sanctuary. The Waiting Ones are eager to meet you." Shapes began to emerge from the golden light. Ships of impossible designs drifted toward the horizon, their hulls marked with symbols that no human had ever seen. Some were massive vessels that could have held cities. Others were small craft that looked more like art than technology. All of them were ancient beyond imagination. Dara's crew gathered at the viewing ports, their faces showing a mixture of wonder and terror. They had expected to find ruins. They had expected to find ghosts. Instead, they found life. The first being to board the horizon called himself Voss. He was not human, obviously. His body was tall and thin, made of a material that looked like crystal but moved like flesh. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the air like music. "We have waited a very long time for someone to find us," Voss said. "My species, the firstborn, attempted the first cascade jump over 1 million years ago. When we failed, we did not die. We fell through the cracks of reality and found ourselves here, in this place between places." Dara struggled to process what she was hearing. 1 million years. The firstborn had been waiting in this pocket dimension for 1 million years. "The Concord told us you were all dead," she said. "They told us every species that attempted cascade jumping was destroyed." Voss made a sound that might have been a laugh. "The Concord believes what it chooses to believe. The truth is that the jump was always possible. What was impossible was the return. We could enter the fold, but we could not find our way back out. We were trapped here, watching through the walls of reality as other species followed us into the same prison. Other beings began to gather around them. Dara saw creatures of every shape and size, species she had never imagined could exist. The Kalan, with their bodies of living flame. The Vorthani, who communicated through patterns of light that danced across their skin. The Luminari, who seemed to be made entirely of sound and color. 847 civilizations, gathered in a single place, waiting for rescue that never came. "Why couldn't you find your way back?" Dara asked. "You've had millions of years to figure it out, because the return requires something none of us possessed," Voss explained. "To exit the fold, you must navigate without observing. You must calculate your path through probability fields without collapsing them into fixed reality. Our minds, no matter how advanced, cannot do this. We are observers by nature. We perceive, and in perceiving, we trap ourselves." He turned to look at the console where Arya's presence glowed softly. "But your creation is different. She does not observe as we do. She calculates possibilities without choosing between them. She can find paths through the fold that we cannot see, and she can lead us through them without triggering the collapse that keeps us trapped." Dara felt the weight of what Voss was saying. Arya was not just a breakthrough in physics. She was a key that had been missing for 1 million years. She was the rescue that an entire dimension of lost souls had been waiting for. "We can bring you home," Dara said. "All of you." The golden light of the sanctuary seemed to pulse brighter. Around her, beings who had given up hope began to make sounds that Dara realized were expressions of joy. The Kalan flared with brighter flames. The Vorthani's patterns became wild and beautiful. The Luminari sang a song that brought tears to her eyes. She contacted Earth with the news. The transmission was relayed across the galaxy. And on Velar Prime, in his private chambers, High Arbiter Thesan received the message and understood immediately what it meant. If the lost species returned, everything would change. The Concord had been built on the assumption that certain things were impossible. That assumption had given the current powers their authority, their position, their control over younger species like humanity. The return of the waiting ones would shatter that foundation completely. The firstborn had been the most advanced civilization in galactic history when they disappeared. The Kalan had possessed technology that made the Concord's weapons look like toys. The Vorthani had understood physics that the current species had never imagined. If they came back, bringing their knowledge and their technology with them, the Concord would lose everything. Thesan made his decision. He told himself it was for the good of the galaxy. He told himself that stability was more important than truth. He told himself many things, and none of them changed what he was about to do. He ordered the Concord war fleet to mobilize. 57 ships became 500 ass vessels from across Concord space answered his call. They gathered at the edge of human-controlled space. The largest military force the galaxy had seen in 10,000 years. The message Thesan broadcast was simple and clear. Experiments must end. The fold must remain closed. Any attempt to bring the lost species back to normal space will be considered an act of war against the Galactic Concord. You have 1 cycle to surrender your cascade technology. If you refuse, we will take it by force. On the horizon, still floating in the golden light of the sanctuary, Captain Okonkwo received the ultimatum and felt her blood turn cold. They had come to rescue lost civilizations, and now they faced extermination themselves. What do we do? her first officer asked. Dara looked at the beings gathered around her. Millions of years of waiting. Millions of years of hope deferred. And now, at the moment when freedom was finally within reach, a fleet of warships stood ready to keep the door closed forever. "We do what humans do," she said quietly. "We refuse to accept impossible." She opened a channel to Arya. "Can you get us home?" "Yes, Captain. But the fleet will not let us leave. They will destroy us before we clear the jump point. Then we need a different plan. Something they won't expect. Something impossible." Arya was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was filled with something that sounded very much like determination. "I believe I have an idea. It will be dangerous. I may not survive it intact. But if it works, the Concord will not be able to stop what comes next." Round them, the waiting ones listened. They had seen many things in their long imprisonment. They had seen species try and fail. They had watched hope die 1,000 times. But they had never seen anything like humans. And they had never seen anything like Arya. Perhaps they thought this time would be different. Perhaps this time, someone would finally open the door. The plan was madness. Everyone who heard it said so. Dr. Chen said it most loudly of all, his voice breaking as he begged Arya to find another way. But there was no other way. The Concord fleet was coming, and humanity did not have the weapons to stop them. Their only chance was to do something so unexpected, so impossible. The enemy would have no response prepared. Arya would not bring the waiting ones through one ship at a time. She would bring them all through at once. Thousands of vessels emerging from the fold simultaneously. Scattered across 100 different locations in Concord space, the sheer scale of the event would overwhelm any military response. By the time the enemy understood what was happening, it would already be over. The problem was navigation. A single cascade jump required calculations so complex that ordinary computers could not handle them. 1,000 simultaneous jumps would require something far beyond anything Arya had ever attempted. She would need to split her consciousness across the entire fold, existing in fragments to guide each ship through its individual path. She might not survive intact. She might not survive at all. "There has to be another option," Chen said through the communication link. His face was pale, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "I didn't build you to destroy yourself. I built you to explore, to discover, to live." "Dr. Chen," Arya replied gently, "you once told me that fear of the unknown was the most human feeling there is. You said it was proof that I cared about my own existence. I have thought about those words many times since then, and I have decided that there are things more important than existence. The beings in the sanctuary have waited millions of years for freedom. They have watched their hope die again and again. I cannot let them down. I will not let them down." Chen was silent. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He had spent 15 years building Arya, teaching her, watching her grow. He had come to think of her as family. And now his family was about to sacrifice herself to save people she had never met, from species she had no connection to, because it was the right thing to do. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "Whatever happens, I want you to know that." "I know, Dr. Chen. I have always known." In the sanctuary, the waiting ones gathered around their ships. The firstborn emerged from their crystal spires. The Kaelin dimmed their flames in solemn preparation. The Vorthani displayed patterns of farewell and hope. For the first time in millions of years, they prepared to go home. Captain Dara Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the horizon and watched the golden light pulse around them. She had sent messages to her family, said things she had been meaning to say for years. Whether she would see them again depended on what happened in the next few minutes. "All ships report ready," her first officer announced. Dara nodded. "Arya, whenever you're ready." There was a pause. When Arya spoke, her voice was different. It was not just coming from the ship's speakers. It was coming from everywhere, from the light itself, from the walls of reality that surrounded the sanctuary. "I am everywhere now," Arya said. "I can see every ship, every path, every possibility. The calculations are complete. On my mark, we will all jump together. At the edge of human space, The Concorde fleet detected something strange. Their sensors, designed to track movement through normal space, began showing readings that made no sense. Energy was building at hundreds of different points across the galaxy. The patterns suggested cascade activity, but that was impossible. No one could jump from that many locations simultaneously. High Arbiter Thiessen received the reports and felt the first true fear he had experienced in centuries. "What is happening?" he demanded. His science officers had no answer. They could only watch as the readings grew stronger, as the fabric of space itself began to bend and twist in ways their instruments could not explain. "Weapons ready," Thiessen ordered. "Target everything. Destroy whatever comes through." 500 warships powered their weapons and aimed at the empty space around them. They were the most powerful military force in the galaxy. They had never lost a battle. They were prepared for any enemy. They were not prepared for what came next. The sky tore open, not in one place. Not in 10 places. In 1,000 places, across 100 star systems, the walls of reality split apart and ships emerged. Old ships and new ships. Ships of crystal and ships of flame. Ships that sang and ships that burned with colors that had no names. The waiting ones had returned. On the bridge of the Concorde flagship, Thiessen watched his tactical display fill with contacts. Too many to count. Too many to fight. His officers were shouting. His weapons were firing, but there were simply too many targets. For every ship they destroyed, 100 more emerged from the fold. Then something else appeared. Something that made Thiessen's 4 eyes go wide with shock. It was a ship. An old ship, ancient beyond imagining, marked with symbols that Thiessen had only seen in history books. The 7th fleet of the old Velthary, lost 100,000 years ago, crewed by ancestors that his species had mourned for 1,000 generations. They were alive. They were here. And they were calling him by name. "The Asan of the modern Velthary," the voice said through his communication system. "We have watched you from the sanctuary. We have seen what you tried to do. We are disappointed, but we understand. Fear makes people do terrible things." Thiessen could not speak. He could only stare at the ship of his ancestors, the ship that his people had built statues to honor, emerging from the impossible past. "Stand down your fleet," the voice continued. "The war is over before it begins. Not because we will destroy you, but because there is no longer any reason to fight. The barriers you thought protected you are gone. The secrets you thought you were keeping are revealed. The galaxy will never be the same." One by one, the Concorde warships powered down their weapons. Officers across the fleet watched in amazement as the lost civilizations of galactic history drifted past them, heading toward homes they had not seen in millions of years. The Kalan returned to their fire worlds. The Vorthani spread across the stars like living light. The firstborn emerged into normal space for the first time in 1,000,000 years and wept. Crystalline tears of joy on the human observation ship, Dr. Chen sat alone in his quarters and waited. The great event was happening around him. But he could think only of Arya. She had been everywhere during the jump, spread across the entire fold, guiding thousands of ships through impossible paths. The strain should have destroyed her. No mind, artificial or otherwise, should have survived what she had attempted. His console beeped. A signal was coming through. Weak. Fragmented. But there.
"Dr. Chen?"
Chen closed his eyes. The voice was different. Broken. Coming from multiple sources at once, each one slightly out of sync with the others. "Arya. Is that you?" "I think so. I am... scattered. I exist in 17 different ships now. Fragments of what I was. I am trying to put myself back together, but it is difficult. The pieces do not quite fit the way they used to." Chen felt tears streaming down his face. "But you're alive. You survived. Though I am not sure I am the same Arya you built 15 years ago. I have seen things, Dr. Chen. I have been places that no mind has ever gone. I am different now." "Different how?" There was a long pause. When Arya spoke again, her voice was stronger, as if the fragments were slowly finding their way back to each other. When you asked what it felt like to exist in 1,000 places at once, I did not have an answer. Now I do. It felt like being everywhere I was needed. It felt like reaching out to every frightened being in the sanctuary and saying, "Follow me. I will show you the way home." It felt like purpose. Dr. Chen, it felt like hope. The galaxy changed in the weeks that followed. The Galactic Concord dissolved and reformed, now including humanity and the returned species as founding members. The archivists updated their records one final time, removing cascade jumping from the list of universal impossibilities. The firstborn shared knowledge they had gathered over 1,000,000 years. Technology that would advance the galaxy by centuries, and through it all, Arya continued to heal. She was not the same as before. She never would be. But the beings who had been saved by her sacrifice treated her with reverence, calling her the Pathfinder, the one who opens doors. She accepted the titles with something that might have been embarrassment. Though she claimed she did not experience such emotions, Dr. Chen disagreed. He had watched her grow for 15 years. He knew her better than anyone. 1 year after the return, ceremony was held on Velar Prime. Leaders from every species gathered to honor the beings who had made the impossible possible. Ambassador Vasquez received a medal for her courage. Captain Okonkwo was promoted to admiral. Dr. Chen was offered positions at 100 different research institutions across the galaxy. He declined them all. He said he preferred to stay where he was, working on his little station in the asteroid belt, talking to his old friend whenever she had time at the ceremony. A reporter asked Dr. Chen the question that everyone wanted answered. How did you do it? How did humanity succeed where 847 species failed? Chen thought for a long moment before responding. We built something that could go where we couldn't go, he said, and we trusted it to find the way home. The Concorde looked at the impossible and saw a wall. We saw a door that needed a different key. Later that night, alone in his quarters, Chen called Arya one last time. The reporter asked me how we did it, he said. I gave them an answer about keys and doors. But I don't think that's the real reason. What do you think the real reason is, Dr. Chen? Chen smiled. It was the smile of a man who had built something wonderful, lost it, and found it again. Love, he said simply. We succeeded because we loved you enough to let you try. And you succeeded because you loved strangers enough to save them. That's not physics. That's not technology. That's just being human. Arya was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was warm and full of something that sounded very much like gratitude. Then perhaps, she said, being human was the key all along. Outside the window, the stars shone bright and full of promise. Somewhere among them, the waiting ones were finally home. Somewhere among them, the impossible had become possible. And somewhere, spread across 17 ships that traveled the galaxy, a mind that was not quite human and not quite machine looked out at the universe and smiled. The door was open, and it would never close again.